Your Excellency, I wanted to start off our discussion with your focus on inclusion in government, and that cuts across various sectors. Can you walk us through your philosophy and why, even through your book, that was a very core value of your work in government?
Thank you very much. It's truly exciting to be back at the World Government Summit to learn from so many leaders in the public and private sector. I think for us in Sierra Leone, His Excellency President Julius Maada Bio in 2018 had a vision for including everybody in schools. So free quality school education, made sure that everybody can go to school free. And we were able to amplify and step on those fundamental principles. So there was a ban on pregnant girls going to school. And he himself, the president, had said the ban will continue. But in the principles of inclusion, in the principles of ensuring that no one gets left behind, we were able to go across the country and convince the people that the right thing to do was to get pregnant girls to go to school. The right thing to do was to get people with disabilities, all kinds of disabilities, seen and unseen, physical disabilities, cognitive challenges, that they need to also be part of schools. Poor people, in which we create school feeding, in which we ensure that we give extra materials to those who need them, those in hard-to-reach areas, the way we prioritize teachers going there, because we understood that if we want to ensure development happens in a sustainable way, we have to do what we call radical inclusion, which is that we create the platforms so everybody can choose to show up and get given the opportunities for them to show up and contribute to national development. And that ethos is really how the people in government push service delivery.
How do you quantify inclusion?
I mean, there are standard metrics that so if we focus on gender, for example, in the first cabinet in 2018, I think there are maybe 4 or 5 ministers who were in cabinet. Today we have 30% of ministers are females, and this required government to pass a law in parliament to say 30% of all people who are elected must be women, so councillors in local councils, parliamentarians, and His Excellency moved that forward and made sure that 30% of all women, of all cabinet ministers are women. And so you can gender, young people as well. We have about 10 of our current ministers of government are 40 years and below. And you have our Minister for Innovation is a 33-year-old young woman, and this is normal now, where His Excellency is making sure the gender, that the demographic, youthfulness are all part of the government, and there are people from all parts of the country as well.
We had a very interesting discussion also prior to the session on the role of benchmarking in policymaking, and how when we look at global benchmarks, the word global has been often too synonymous with the word Western. So how do you balance benchmarking when devising policies that are very context-driven, I would say?
I mean, it's a really interesting question, because I was the chair of the Global Education Monitoring Report, which looks at benchmarks for SDG 4. And when you try to meet those benchmarks, which are great, the world decides them, but the context varies. So take global education, right? Everybody always talks about Finland being the best education system. The US is a great education system. And we just take it for granted, right? And then what happened? We had COVID, and everybody went to the same point. Schools closed, there was nobody in school, the Great Reset. Then we truly saw the leaders across the world. Dubai, UAE, open government, open education, the way you use digital education. Sierra Leone was a global example, how we were able to commit money. 22% of our budget goes to education, even during COVID, when most countries are removing money from education. How schools reopened, you saw the schools, the countries that reopened quickly weren't the United States. It was Sierra Leone, it was other countries, it was Rwanda, it was UAE, and we needed to almost come to that point, that reset, to understand, to say, wait a minute, what are we really measuring? How are we ensuring, when we speak about digital education, that it's not the kids, we don't just speak about it for the kids who are in New York or who are in California, but in Sierra Leone, some of the things that we're doing, hybrid technology, everybody had access to SMS, and we're building tools for kids to have access to the dictionary by SMS and USSD for free. How are we ensuring that we're building solutions such that the kids who are farthest, who are poorest, who are most marginalized are able to get access to the same quality of solutions as those who are in the urban areas and who are wealthy? To be able to do that, it's a different metric, it's a different benchmark. And so we, as a world, realize that some of the things we thought were the most important metrics for education weren't necessarily true. And we needed that framework and that context around the world to begin to appreciate the value and the experiences of smaller countries like ours.
And being aware that you can't adopt a cookie cutter approach when it comes to governance. And a notable framework we wanted to shed light on, if you can walk us through it, is Sierra Leone's Big Five agenda, and what key sectors underpin the framework, and do you think it can be scalable to the wider continent as well?
So there's continuation in development. The reason why I love coming to the UAE is you see what it means to have sustained development over 50 years, 52 years, the transformation that it requires. And so some of the things we've done in Sierra Leone, we had the focus in 2018 to 2023, we focused on the human capital development. And we made sure that we had well over 3 million kids going to school, million of them getting school feeding, all of them getting books, hundreds of thousands taking public exams and transitioning through to higher education. And then now, His Excellency decided that this is great, we need to keep it, but we need to expand a little bit more. So our Big Five agenda, first is feed Salone. We have to be able to feed ourselves and grow our own food locally, expand on the food value addition. Second is human capital development, skills in addition to what we had done. Third is youth employment. Ultimately, 70% of our population is young. The median age is 19. We have to be able to ensure that people are learning the right skills to get jobs so they can add value to the economy. But you can't do that if the public sector is not reformed. And so the fourth pillar we have is public sector, justice sector, local governance reform, so that whatever you're doing in the cabinet room can go all the way to the people who are receiving those services, and in a just way. And the final piece is innovation and infrastructure, and which is why it's really wonderful and that this is a theme of the summit here, because government, public sector leaders have to think differently about innovation. They have to be the innovators. They have to be the technologists and the scientists solving problems, policy problems, such that we can expedite scale, the human scale. So these are our Big Five, and that His Excellency wants us to focus on. And one thing that we're also doing, which is quite interesting, usually these medium-term national development plans that countries have 5 years or 4 years, depending on your election cycle. This time we said no, you have to think bigger than an election cycle. So we have a 7-year medium-term national development plan that will take us all the way to, it's aligned with the SDGs 2030.
Speaking of which, I wanted to circle back to that question, because the world is clearly off track when it comes to SDGs. But from your experience with Sierra Leone's model, what can the world do better when it comes to, not just reaching the SDGs, but also thinking beyond that existing timeline that is looming?
And I'm not saying this because I was recently an education minister, but I think the world can learn a lot from the education sector. What happened in 2022, 2023 was the UN Secretary General had what he called the Transforming Education Summit, which led to every country having national conversations and consultations at the local level, national level, which led into regional conversations. There were pre-test meetings that all the partners came to, and ultimately in New York, countries made commitments. The world, every country made commitments, and then we have these global goals as well, these global priorities. And if the world did that, and we told ourselves that we have to accelerate, we knew we were far, far, far off in meeting the targets for SDG 4. Today, even with countries' own benchmarks, they still might not, many still might not. But we have to force ourselves to shift back to the curve that will get us to at least go towards the 2030 goals. So I think what the world needs to have, and it doesn't have to be in the same way as the Transforming Education Summit happened, but we need to align behind these global goals, be honest with ourselves, know how far off we are from the curve to get us there, and then figure out a plan to help us accelerate towards those goals.
Sierra Leone also has an interesting philosophy on the role of women when it comes to accelerating among various sectors technological advancements. And we actually had an interesting discussion where you said that it's women that are leading Pan-African efforts to advance technology in the continent. Can you shed more light on that?
I mean, I think like I mentioned, the Minister for Innovation in Sierra Leone is a 33-year-old young woman who has gone through the public sector system, gone to get skills, and then come back. The people who she's hanging out with and having conversations with is Minister Paula, who's in the room who's the Minister for Innovation as well from Rwanda, Minister Sina, who's the minister from Togo, and in the outside government sector as well, Juliana Rotish in Kenya. When you have people like Her Excellency Paula, Her Excellency Sina, Her Excellency Salima, with Juliana, then the conversation is very different. Then the conversation isn't about who's first to show our latest models, but it is how do we share, how do we engage, how do we make sure that we're all collaborating, what are the right AI models, how do we think about Pan-African satellite networks, how do we think about policies that we can share to make sure that our children get access to the right set of solutions.
You've mentioned time and time again the role of youth, and I wanted to ask what you think, how you view the aspirations of youth in Sierra Leone and how we can bring them closer to aspirations of young people in the region, because global challenges are global in nature. Where do you think we can do more together?
I think young people everywhere want peace. Young people everywhere want to show up how they want to show up. Young people everywhere want jobs and to have a security. And the way we ensure that happens is by giving them the right set of skills, is by making sure that there's justice, is by making sure that we as policymakers prioritize equity, radical inclusion, so they can choose to be themselves. They can choose to show up and contribute. If they want to contribute as musicians, they contribute as musicians. If they want to be football stars, if they want to be people in public sector. But we have to make sure that the incentives for young people must be aligned with their vision and aspirations for keeping the world peaceful, for there to be more justice, for there to be equity, for there to be more humanity.
We wanted to discuss as well how Sierra Leone is a model for governance. What would be some key takeaways that you'd like us to reflect on that perhaps haven't made it to mainstream coverage about Sierra Leone globally?
I mean, I think leadership is something, and I say this both locally. I don't just say this because, he's my boss, but President Bio has really set a real standard for leadership. People did not like it, but he gave young people critical portfolios. The ministers for his flagship programs are young people. He made me chief minister, and I think that is important, that we can have women and young people take really important portfolios. But the one thing as well, actually, in Sierra Leone, we've been mining for 90 years. If you Google Sierra Leone, probably mining comes up. And in the places where we were mining, 90 years later, His Excellency has decided that no, we can't just be digging all these rocks and dumping it and putting holes in our communities and leaving. What we are going to do is we're going to put universities there now. So 90 years later, Cornell, which everybody knows where all the mining comes from, will have a technical university for science and technology from the same rocks that people were mining and putting to the side. And that is the real transformation that we need to get to.